And then we met this evening to discuss labor negotiations. And again, staff was given direction, but there is no reportable action.
Thank you. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance, which the city attorney will also be leading us in.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to item 5, agenda modifications. Do my colleagues have any modifications this evening?
Yes, Madam Mayor, if I may. The city lost a good friend, not just to the city, but to many of us. Larry Whitaker, unfortunately, has passed. Larry served on our Fiscal Sustainability Committee and our FIOC Committee, among others, and volunteered his time to do a major do-over of the city's website along the way. So I would just like to ask that we take a moment of silence in honor of Larry and his passing.
Thank you for bringing that. I would like to be able to do that. Larry also and his wife were very active on the Friends of the Lincoln Library and have contributed to a lot of other community functions.
Rotary as well.
Rotary, yeah, very active. And so I think that's a very appropriate suggestion. So let's take a moment for the Whitakers. All right, let's, anyone else have agenda modifications? No. All right, thank you for that, Paul. Let's move on to presentations. Tonight, we do have a presentation from Placer County Veterans Monument at Mcdean Park, and I believe that Don Witt is joining us via Zoom to give that to us. Is he on, Gwen? All right.
I am here, and if I can, I'd like to share my screen.
We can see it, I believe.
Actually, can you see it already? This is if you're looking at the grapevines, that's just my
yeah, that's what we see.
Okay, so I'd like to share my screen here if it works. Okay,
take your time.
And
there you go.
Okay, so I have a presentation, but I'm going to speed through this rather quickly. I think some of it will be reviewed, but for some it may be rather new. So the Lincoln Veterans Memorial Coalition, the goal was really to, well, it was formed by 5 organizations. The American Legion, Lincoln Hills Veterans Coalition, the VFW, the Semper Fi organization, and the Women's Veterans Alliance. The goal was to build a monument in Lincoln, and it was to represent all of the military services, all of the branches, and all of the wars, as well as represent those who are still in active duty, reserves, or retired. I think many of you have been to the exact location in Mcdean Park, and there's a photo of it prior to any activity. We originally started out looking that the monument was going to cost around $130,000. Right now, we're assessing that it's going to cost around $250,000, and so our goal is actually $350,000 to be raised. The events that we've actually had weren't that many as far as fundraising. A couple shred-its, a couple barbecues. In 2021, we had one more barbecue. And so the current money that we've actually raised is $249,000, which includes donations, plaque sales, and additional fundraising. So the goal at this point is $350,000. Fundraising started in May. I think you have to move something on my screen here. Of 2019. By March, we had raised $100,000, and to date, 249,000. We have an incredibly active board, 18,000 community service hours. Ouch. We've all spent a lot of time on this one. And we do need, one thing I wanted to convey to you is that we do need approximately $100,000 in the future. So as you're talking to people in the community, if you could spread the word that we're open to donations and for military to put their plaque on the monument, that'd be great. But we're still in need of funds, even though the monument is in pretty good shape right now. So the project started in 2017, became a 501c3 April 18, groundbreaking March 15th, 2021. Construction started a month later. The unveiling was May 31st. I had about 2,000 people there per Scott. And it was an awesome event. Then we opened it up to the public September 10th, and then this November we're going to have the unveiling of Panel 5. Congressman McClintock will be speaking there. Kevin Kiley will speak. We have one of the John Lowe from, I think it's the American Legion. Excuse me, I think it's the Veterans of Foreign Wars that's going to be speaking as well. And we'll have the Marine Corps Color Guard, bagpipers. So it's going to be a pretty good event. And if you could spread the word about that too, I think it's going to have a lot of people there. The design, I think you're very familiar with. We actually had the groundbreaking. I mentioned the date previously. Went through the construction process. We had the unveiling. There's the board and some of the dignitaries that were there, Kevin Kiley, et cetera. And it was an incredible event. So here's the finished product from the flagpole side, along with the small medallion that was at the top. And the night view of the monument. So lastly, we have to recognize our sponsors. We always want to do that. We're going to do that at the November 11th event as well. And but I wanted to especially thank some of the people. Jake Bradley, he basically constructed the City Hall medallion stand. Took a lot of time and effort. We appreciate it. So on behalf of the entire board, I'd like to give him a certificate. Same thing goes for Scott Boynton. He's been very supportive during the monument construction and special events. And then lastly, to the board. So thank you. And that's my update. Speed, that was a speed drive there, I think. We are definitely open for donations. People can go to our website and contribute their order plaques. And we look forward to seeing them on November 11th. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don. Thank you for specifically calling out our city staff. We really appreciate everything. Getting a bad echo. Much better. No, not better.
I was on the.
We appreciate all that you guys have done at that memorial. This is really bad.
It's probably done.
Oh, can he mute? And then he is muted. Interesting. I will try to talk as little as possible and see if my colleagues have anything that they'd like to say.
I have a quick question. Don, what time is the unveiling on the 11th?
Good question. It is at 11:11.
That's what I thought.
Very, very consistent with Armistice Day.
Great. Thank you so much.
So that was interesting. The echo is on our end, not his.
Yeah.
So I do want to point out one thing. Don mentioned in passing that they need $100,000 for ongoing maintenance and possible future construction. I think that's really important, that does not become a burden of the city or of the county, but that they're able to provide that through donations in perpetuity. So even after they meet their goals, we should all be pushing very hard to help them fund that.
I think it shouldn't be that difficult to be able to continue to help fundraise for that. It's an amazing asset to the city, and recognizing all who've served. Do any of my other colleagues have anything they'd like to say about it? Go ahead.
So Dawn, I was wondering if you were aware, the mayor and I took a tour of Glading Mcbean a few weeks back, and they are offering to pay for the plaques of any veterans that worked at the plant.
Oh, yes, we've been working very closely with Jamie and her staff. And
Awesome.
yeah, in fact, we have 4 more that are looking to try and get their plaques taken care of that we're to be sending over there.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure you're aware. I figured you were, but we were super excited to hear that.
Oh, yeah. When we talk with corporate sponsors, we actually encourage them to think of their employees, and as well as businesses in the community. Think of your employees, buy them a plaque.
Well, I would just encourage anyone listening to come out for it on the 11th. The unveiling was spectacular. And let's open up to public comment. It's horrible.
Don't have any hands raised on Zoom.
Okay.
No hands are in the chamber.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Don, for joining us and providing that presentation.
Thank you for the time and the opportunity, and we really appreciate the support from the city and look forward to it in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any hands raised on Zoom. I don't see any hands in the chambers.
All right, thank you. We'll move on from public comment and go to the consent agenda. As a reminder, all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the city council or resident requests a specific item be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the remainder of the consent agenda. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove an item? None. Any from the public?
Mayor, I don't see one hand raised. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chapman does. Just the one. Okay.
Move approval of the remainder of the consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
I think Holly got that. Can I get a roll call?
Real echo.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent,
Yes.
Councilmember Lortson,
Yes.
and Mayor Sohi.
Yes. Let's go on to AI. This is a resolution approving the plans and specifications and authorizing a budget augmentation of just over 85,000 from Fund 221, which is a gas tax for City Hall ADA downtown curb ramps. Let's get the question first and then a staff report. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me all right?
We can, yes.
Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area, also the council and city staff. Again, the work has been going on with the city regarding AD compliance, and certainly happy to see and it's being forwarded in order to do the compliance for the city of Lincoln. After I was reading the packet, though, something caught my eye worth mentioning. It's on page 3 in section 4 conclusion, and it's the very last sentence, and it reads, by approving the project, the city will benefit by providing ADA accessibility And I would have thought it probably ended there, but it goes on to say, and reducing the liability of future legal litigation. Let me explain why I think that's on the packet. First, I would have hoped that the city's councils over the last 27 years had simply overlooked the disability issues that the Lincoln needed to take care of. But unfortunately, that is definitely not the case. The city did not budget funds for an annual basis until 2017, and that was due to a civil suit that was brought against the city. No one should have to take and engage the city and hire an attorney in order to get things done, whether you're non-disabled or disabled. The court upheld the civil rights for the disabled community. Now think about this for a moment. A city council, less than 50,000 residents, defied the federal government and purposely denied the civil rights for the disabled as they were signed into law in 1990. That person was me. I took no pleasure in suing the city. Every effort was made in order to avoid the legal action. In order to bring this issue to the city council meetings, I did that for many, many months. The council refused to uphold their sworn oath when taking office, and it reads towards the end, and will use my best endeavor to preserve the peace and carry into effect according to law the purposes for which I have been elected, so help me God. So with that, I urge everyone to take part in your city government via Zoom, in person, however that may be. Our city government isn't very, it's basically, it's complicated, but yet basic. But we need all our eyes and ears paying attention to what is voted on before it's actually voted. There have been some wonderful people on previous and current councils, but without your guidance, things can get derailed and the few honest ones have to be built uphill. My last comment is that this is also happening with the attempted annexation of some 4,000 plus acres where citizens are asking to be giving up their properties, getting their rights changed, all because they want to stay in their place. So with that, I would hope that everyone comes to the meetings in order to protect your rights because they are in question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if staff wants to respond. Would that be legal or would that be Mr. Prosser?
I'm happy to just briefly comment
Okay.
that my suspicion is that the only reason the future legal litigation is referenced in the staff report is that the improvements that are being made were actually part of the settlement agreement between the city and Mr. Chapman, and that those improvements are, according to the agreement, required to be completed by the end of January of next year. And so that's the circumstances under which this project arises.
That makes sense. Thank you. Do we have any further public comment?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
All right.
See any other hands?
Do I have a motion?
Move approval of the item.
Second.
Can I get a roll call?
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
and Mayor Silhai.
Yes. All right, we'll move along. We do not have any public hearing items tonight, so we'll go to 10, general business, starting with 10A. Adopt resolution 2021-206, amending the City of Lincoln Master Fee Schedule to incorporate the fiscal year 21-22 Placer County Conservation Program development fees adjusted for annual inflation. And Mr. Prosser is giving the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Silhai and honorable members of City Council. The item for you tonight is a master fee schedule amendment for amending the master fee schedules for the Placer County Conservation Programs, 2 fees that are associated with our agreement with the county. The county Board of Supervisors have passed a similar exact fee increase. And they're requesting that our fees match what was proposed by the Placer Conservation Agency and adopted by the Board of Supervisors. For fiscal year 21-22, the increases are just over 1.5% for each of the 2 fees, the land conversion fee and the special habitat fee. Again, a minimal increase in fees just to cover inflation. And so staff has recommended that City Council adopt a resolution to bring our fee schedule in line with the PCA's recommendation and the county's approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions on that? It seems pretty straightforward.
Exactly right.
Any? All right. Do you have any public comment?
No hands on Zoom. I don't see any hands in the chamber either.
All right, I'll bring it back. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve or adopt resolution 2021-206, amending the City of Lincoln Master Fee Schedule to incorporate the fiscal year 21-22 Placer County Conservation Program development fees adjusted for the annual inflation.
Second.
Can I get a roll call?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skip, Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Silhai.
Yes. All right, we will move along to item 10B. City Council discussion and possible direction for staff to evaluate a proposal by the Housing Trust Placer, Inc. regarding a contribution toward a Lincoln-based affordable housing project. And our city manager, Mr. Scott, will be giving that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this item is, the report indicates, came up late as we're putting the agenda together. But I thought it was worthy of a preliminary discussion with the city council. We were approached, Councilmember Carl Skint referred officials from Housing Trust Placer Inc. to my office to address some questions they had as they are working toward acquiring a project site in the city of Lincoln to upgrade the facility, an apartment complex, small apartment complex, upgrade the facility and make it available for affordable housing. Obviously, affordable housing's an important issue, not only because of the community need, but also because we have some obligations. All cities have obligations to provide affordable housing. This group, Housing Trust Placer, is a nonprofit composed of people who are very skilled in various aspects of the housing industry, who have set as a mission facilitating the development of affordable housing, both directly by providing project support, but also for working toward the removal of barriers and providing help in establishing subsidies to allow affordable housing projects to move forward. You all know, and I'll say just for the sake of public, that affordable housing projects almost never happen without a certain level of subsidy. I mean, the reason there's such a shortage is that it's just not possible to build these developments in such a way that they pay for themselves as you go. So it's always important to figure out where the funding can come from to put these deals together. They're often very complex financial structures. In this particular case, the group was approaching us as they would other cities if they were looking at projects in their areas to see if we had affordable housing funds available that might be applied at some level to help support, to put that whole financing package together. They initially were looking at us as a possibility of about a 10% contribution to put the whole financing package together. We looked, and as you know, we do have affordable housing funds that are available in the city's keeping. We have funds in the old redevelopment agency housing area, the successor agency housing funds. There's about $1.7 million that is set aside for housing projects. What used to happen was cities would save that money up until it got to a critical mass that you could go out and pursue a substantial project. In recent times, cities aren't able, we don't have an RDA anymore, and there's not housing set aside money being provided from development. And so these funds aren't really going to accumulate in the kind of numbers that used to exist. So the idea of taking some of those funds to contribute toward a project like this is a very achievable move, and cities are doing those kinds of projects. So I think, first of all, that $1.7 million is a pot from which we could draw to help with a project like this, if this council were so interested. The other source that we have is from 3 different community development block grant and home funds, home being the name of the program. We have 3 different funds with remnants of project funding. Mostly it was the funding of initial home loans that people have repaid, and the city has assembled a certain amount of money. There is some risk that those funds would be drawn back from HUD at some point. So it is probably a good idea to look for a strategy for using these funds. So that's about $1.2 million, as I recall. So we're very close to having about $3 million worth of affordable housing funds that could be applied. We're not tonight asking you to support a project because there's no project in front of you. It's not on the agenda for that. What we're asking for tonight is the city council's discussion of the concept of using these funds in this kind of process. If you are interested in that, then it would also be helpful to have input from you in terms of any kind of public process you think that we would need to follow in order to use funds like this. Obviously, as a government, we're not used to just talking to the first party in the door who wants funds and say, here, we'll do this. There's usually a public process that involves, but I will say that I'm quite impressed with the objectives of the Housing Trust Placer, and I'm quite impressed with the project that they're looking at that we haven't defined at this point because it's not on the agenda. But I do think that they would have a very positive approach to doing this and a positive impact on the community if the council were so inclined when we present that, if we present that. So I'm looking for your feedback, and then we can, based on that, we'll decide if we want to bring a project in for specific discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go in normal order. Councilman Andrade, did you have questions or comments?
I have a question. Mr. Scott, so reading here, it says the property under consideration consists today of an older apartment complex in need of upgrades. So they already have one identified? Okay. Are you able to say which one or no?
No,
okay.
let me be obvious.
We don't want to.
I was just curious.
Let me say the obvious.
Yeah.
When you start talking about a city providing funding for a project, the price goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about a specific project at this point. Before the city could actually fund something, we would certainly have to identify specifics.
Okay, so this particular, what they're talking about here is refurbishing something already existing, not building something new.
That's correct.
Joyner?
We'll have to answer at the same time.
So many echoes. It's like 5 voices. Councilmember Joyner.
So I do know which project this is.
Of course you do.
Well, not because anybody told me, but because I know the city well enough to be able to figure it out.
Well, I can probably figure it out.
And so let me say this. I think that this is, if we have the funds and there is a partner that is willing to acquire this property and upgrade it and keep it in the affordable housing inventory, that is a very appropriate thing to do and something I haven't seen the city do in a great many years. So I would be very supportive of this. As to process, I don't know that the council can speak to the appropriate process. I think we'd have to turn to legal and to your experience for guidance on that.
And we might have different process depending on the source of funds we use.
Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Croskett.
Just regarding this project, I assume that because of the number of dollars, I assume that we could find the money without disturbing our budget someplace. And that's why I engaged in original conversation and then asked the city manager to verify. What we're looking at is a direction thing, and my take is anytime that we have the potential of something like this, the only way we're going to have an impact on affordable housing, the affordable housing problem, is if we develop public-private relationships. And so I was approaching it from that standpoint. The force multipliers that we get with our dollars are considerable. And they also, this is almost like a donation in the fact that it's certainly nowhere near the cost of the project. I just, direction wise, I say anytime that our funding's available, you have a project that makes sense, and particularly saving affordable housing in the city makes sense. And you have a partner in the private sector that wants to work with you. I'm for it, given it hits our qualifiers. I just think philosophically, that's one of the major paths we're going to have to take to achieve affordable housing. We've talked about it in the past where, maybe land donation. Well, that's a donation also, right? So you treat them all, and you're just saying within the funding structure that we have, if we can afford it and the right thing comes along, we ought to do it. And this is a project that probably will end up not being affordable if somebody else does it because of the cost of rehab. The other thing that I've noticed in talking, and I've done it for 6 years now with developers and people interested in doing affordable housing, is the nonprofits are not interested in building. They can't afford to build new projects as much as they can afford to rehabilitate and repurpose existing units. And that's the way they're going. So if we can help a lot of those along the way, we're going to get the affordable housing that will reduce our obligation to the state. So that's where I sit for that. If I gave direction, it would be philosophically, we ought to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's it.
Councilor Lordson.
I would have to agree with Councilman Carlskin on that. If the funds are available and we can do it, let's do it.
Are you done?
I'm done.
All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Making sure.
Just wanted to make sure. For me, I'm sensitive to the portion of your comments about a public process and how we would normally want to put a program out. This is the first that I've heard that we have 3 million or almost 3 million available for affordable housing. This council's been talking about affordable housing since I got elected 3 years ago. So that's exciting to me. And I would love for us.
First time I've heard it in 14 years, by the way.
So that makes me feel a little better and also a little worse. But I know we have a lot of other priorities too. So I would love to be able to try to figure out a program and how we use those funds. I think that your concern that those get pulled back by HUD is a real concern to have. And we probably want to figure out how we might want to use those. That aside, I would hate for us to lose something that is a viable and valuable opportunity that's like now present and available because we failed to have a public process in place and time to deal with it. So for me, I'd love to put in a public process in place for the 3 million and also figure out how we do this now and make sure that they're viable and that it will be an attractive benefit to our community. It sounds like you've already done the vetting and that you feel very confident. I think with your 37 years, I very much trust your opinion on that. So my inclination would be, please bring something back to us for us to actually have a discussion on to do it.
Mayor,
Yes, please go.
you're right. Again, kind of building on what I said, these are going to pop up. They're all going to pop up in a competitive environment. You know, all, I'm sure $3 million worth well. That our process gives the level of what public, the process needs to be efficient.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what you said. But so even with this first one, if we can do the process and then that becomes the process.
And we can further fine tune the process as necessary after we go through it. My main concern is that we make sure that we check all whatever boxes that, you know, HUD and HCD have for us for affordable housing and properties, and that we don't miss anything on that front and whatever revenue streams, because I know that those are consorting a few varieties that all have strings attached to them, so that we just make sure we check our boxes on that. But would love to figure it out.
A couple things. I think with the HUD money, we probably would have to do an amendment of some sort in public hearing process. Because we're changing the adopted plan the last time that money had been affected. With the successor agency money, it would probably be an easier process. We certainly would have to go through the oversight board, which is not that complicated a process anymore. There was a day, but not anymore. And whether they would have to send that to Department of Finance, I don't know, but Department of Finance this is affordable housing. They're quite supportive of that. So I think there's a path to go. I do agree. I would hate to see us lose a viable project. It's not like people are lined up at our door offering these.
I was going to say, in the last 3 years, this is literally the only one that has been brought forward that's like fully baked.
So to me, the process would be that we're telling the public that opportunity exists.
Yeah.
Bring us another good project. You know, that's I think what we'd be saying publicly, and I think all of that should be agreeable to the housing community, the community of people that are trying to build affordable housing. They care about getting housing built. So I think it would be a fairly well supported strategy.
Let's go to public comment and then we can bring it back.
Mayor, I don't have any hands raised on Zoom. I do have a hand in the chambers.
Yes, Byron Chapman. Mayor, I too, from a standpoint of all the years of, particularly for Lincoln here, you know, trying to get affordable housing in the city has been, you know, quite a chore. I would think, well, on a couple of levels. One, if we do indeed have the funds, it truly would be a major loss if we didn't try to do everything we could in which to put those funds to good use. And if it left our hands, and then we have no option. The second part about it is I would hope that by having that process in place, and retrospecting, everybody can do a Sunday quarterback. But if we had that process in place, who could say how quickly we would have other contractors, people coming in to try to make that happen? And so to utilize those funds, if they are there for that, the sooner you can at least, like you said, get that in, get it vented, do everything we need to do. But once it's in place, as you put it, the public would certainly hear about it. Developers would certainly hear about it. And let's face it, the city of Lincoln, I think, is a little bit behind the ball. We really need to try to play catch up as best we can. And I think this is probably a good opportunity to do it. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, we did have a hand raised on Zoom. Would the phone number ending in 7296, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mike Mcdean. A couple questions and comments. There was a recent Board of Supervisors agenda item that involved an organization like this that my impression was they were just forming. So perhaps it's a different one than this. Now, I guess the idea here is not necessarily to work with this organization, but to have this open to different organizations. I'm not sure. And I think it would also be important to know the affordable housing experience of the individuals and their organizations that get involved in this, whether it's the one named here or others. Thanks.
Thank you.
No other hands are raised, Mayor.
All right, we'll close public comment and we'll bring it back up. Do any of my colleagues have some more thoughts? I have a few.
I've got a question
Go for it.
and I guess a couple last thoughts. Mark, I'm going to assume that this HUD money is the CDBG money that we use for our first-time home buyers program.
At least part of it.
Okay, and so some of that has been repaid over years and replenished it. And the intent of that was to continue that program on. We have not done that, to the best of my knowledge, for the last several years. So I think this is an appropriate, if allowable, use of those funds. And then I think as we've talked this through, I think what we're probably looking at in terms of process is there's an opportunity before us. Let's not let that go by. But then we probably need to take a look at perhaps requests for proposals, putting them out broadly, and even whether we're willing to use some of this funding proactively to acquire properties that might be more appropriate for this type of project than those properties the city currently owns. And we could even go so far as I think there's an opportunity or two for land swaps between property that we do own and other pieces of property that are more desirable. So all of that could be in the mix moving forward.
I like that idea. Anyone else? You look like you had something, Dan. Caribbean.
Councilmember, can you unmute yourself?
A new expression, even live. Can you unmute yourself?
It's much better than it was. I don't sound as much like a Muppet anymore. You can unmute yourself.
I think there was that 575K.
I'm sorry, your time's up, Dan.
I echo what I said before. The 500, I think there was a Board of Supervisors vote to transfer $573,000 to Hauser Housing Trust Placer a few months ago, but that, as I understood it, was not for a specific project. I might be wrong. I thought it was just seed money, but it might have been for a project.
You look like you have an answer.
I just want to, no, I think it is the same without doubt. But what I wanted to do now that I've had confirmation that that first-time home buyers money is part of this money, I was very familiar with that funding source, just not as it might apply to this. So half of that equation I was familiar with.
Okay.
I was on that committee for 2 years. You've been on it for a year or two, I think. There's been a request for any of that money
No.
in years.
No, at all. That's what I'm saying. And I'd like to emphasize that because I don't want to make it seem like we're rushing through something, but it's not every day that a good viable project that has a location that is suitable. And what I like about this location is, the public's split on affordable housing. Some people realize that we need it and that it's a benefit to our community. And some people really don't like the idea of it and think that it's a detriment to the community. But what I like about the proposed, at least non-specific site, is that it exists. It's in need of repair. It's going to make it better for that neighborhood. It's already probably having habitation that people might find issue with. This is going to elevate it, make it nicer, make it better, and provide affordable housing to our community. I literally don't see a downside. All right. Do you have what you need from us?
I do. Thank you.
All right. Is everyone good?
We'll bring this back fairly quickly.
Yeah, please do. So, because I know you said it's time urgent, correct?
And time matters on these negotiations. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for bringing it forward. All right. That was the last item of business. So we'll move on to council initiated business. Starting with Councilmember Andrada.
Yeah, I do have something. I actually don't know if it's business or information, but I'm going to say it now. So I'm sure that all of you, I know those of us who are in DC knew about it, but I wanted to bring it in a formal way to council and let the public know too that the State Redistricting Commission are redrawing maps for congressional districts. And their goal, or what it looks like their goal is to break up Placer County for these congressional districts, and several different maps say different things. Like one of them is putting Rockland off by itself and bringing pieces of Sacramento County into our area for the purposes of congressional districts. And so I would like to request that we as a council address the commission. They are giving preference to the electeds in Placer County first. I would really encourage citizens to send a letter asking for them to please keep Placer together. I've sent Ms. Scanlon a boilerplate letter that was pretty good, that if we wanted to use and sign that. But I think it's really important that because of the makeup of Placer, because of our lifestyle here, because of the resources here, that we have to really do what we can to keep Placer together and not let the redistricting commission break us apart. And it's not a political issue. It's a like community. It's a, tradition in Placer County. So anyway, I'm very concerned about that. And there's a little bit of urgency to this. So I just want to bring it forward and see what you think about it.
Can I request that we maybe do whatever? I don't know if that goes through our government, like public policy platform, like by email, or if that is required to be put on an agenda. It seems like it might fall in line with one or the other. But also there was some talk in DC of perhaps doing a full countywide, all councils from all municipalities plus the Board of Supervisor letter. I think that would be far more impactful. So I don't know if staff wants to follow up with other.
However we want to do it, just, yeah.
Like maybe that is something. Would that be from the city attorney's office? Would that be from the city manager's office? Who would be coordinating with the staffs of the other cities and Board of Supervisors to see if that letter can be facilitated?
I think we can probably tag team it. I think
Okay.
it certainly would fall under your public policy platform, but
Yeah,
we can
maybe facilitate that and see how that.
certainly
Okay.
take that on.
I'll be surprised if there aren't other cities interested already.
Oh,
It was talked about a lot at DC. And so I think that I don't know who's trying to lead that or whatnot, but let's make sure that it happens.
So I won't be as gentle about this as my fellow council member just was. This is a political effort
Well, it is.
to shift.
I'm going to assume this is also your council initiated business so
It
that
is
we're
not.
not continuing a discussion.
We are not continuing a discussion, but I just want to say, to get accurate information out there, this is largely political in nature, attempting to move a largely Democrat district of Sacramento into a community of interest that is not like in any way,
In any
shape,
way.
or form.
Correct.
And that's our real challenge with this.
Yeah.
So we're probably saying the same
No, I
thing.
agree with you, but I was told that, when we address them, we can't make it a political issue. That was my point.
Got it.
Yeah, right.
let's discuss this when we can.
There you go.
Councilmember Joyner, do you have a council initiated?
Council initiated
Hold on,
business? No, because
City attorney looks like she wants to talk.
No, I was just going to say, we're all becoming very well acquainted with communities of interest in our CVRA discussions with our own.
Be nice if the state decided to acquaint themselves with their own law. Councilmember Joyner.
council initiated business, no, that is the asking of consensus to do some form of business. So
Councilor Croskin. They're proposing. Yeah, could we get that emailed out to us perhaps?
Did receive an email today and it does have the vision. So I will
Okay.
forward that to all
Please.
of council as well as put it in our e-bulletin tomorrow.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Dan. Councilor Lordson.
Well, this is, these maps are being drawn by basically a nonpartisan organization, so I don't want to even insinuate that it could be partisan. I've heard different takes on this, and it was basically including us with other suburban areas, not necessarily the city of Sacramento, but with other suburban areas. Anyway, this process, we're losing a congressman. So we're only going to have 52 districts. The districts got to be withdrawn. They all have to be more or less of equal size. First, it to be contiguous. That's second, and then communities of interest. So I'm not really sure how this is going to come out at all. But anyhow, I like to see the maps though.
I would love to view the state's activities through the same rose-colored glasses. All right, let's move along to information items. Councilmember Andreatta. You don't want to update on Cap to Capital? I mean, the DC trip?
Yeah, actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah, we went to DC last week with the Placer Business Alliance, and I thought it was very beneficial. It's different than the Sac Metro Chamber Cap to Cap. It was more, Placer County centered, but spent some good time with Congressman McClintock and Congressman Amalfa and their staffs. And we talked about water and, forest management and wildfires. And I felt that it was an education. Yeah, that was really good. I felt that it was very productive and I learned a lot. And I think it's always good when the leaders of Placer County get together and we can meet and talk. And I think it's productive, and I enjoyed it and came back with a lot of good information. And I really hope we do get a Hillsdale College here because that would be awesome.
Councilor Joyner.
Yes, I too, whenever we travel on something like this on taxpayers' dollars, I like to do a report out and find something of merit that justifies that trip. And while this trip was, first of all, it was the first Placer Business Alliance trip. So I think they were still figuring things out. The networking was extremely good. The information was extremely good. There was a promise of follow-up and a similar type meeting back home very soon. I hope we do that. I think that's very important. But beyond that, in my role as a member of PCTPA and Sparta, an issue has popped up with the Federal Highways Administration reinterpreting an existing law 10 years in that will ultimately, if successful, take $30 million worth of monies that would come directly to PCTPA for projects in Placer County, and instead shift that to SACOG for a 6-county competitive round. And the simple reality of that, and by the way, those monies would come from El Dorado County as well. So they're our partner agency in El Dorado, have a very similar setup to what Placer County does. But what that would do is put us into, instead of the 4-county competitive round that exists within Sacramento right now, throw us and the funding we normally would receive into a 6-county competitive round. And the reality is there are always going to be projects that are more urgent and more needed in the greater Sacramento area than there are in Placer County. So this would effectively be bleeding off $30 million worth of funding from from PCTPA. So with that in mind, we worked that problem very hard. Back in DC, SACOG, PCTPA, and EDCTC, which is El Dorado's transportation agency, came to an agreement to make a request of the Federal Highways Commission for a one-year extension so we can try to sort this out. It doesn't only apply to us. There's some very large regional transportation planning agencies throughout California that are also affected. So this will likely go to the courts somewhere along the way. But we were able to do that as a short-term fix that I think will be successful. But also Congressman LaMalfa and Congressman McClintock's offices, upon hearing the issue and reading the language, immediately jumped on. In fact, Congressman McClintock wanted to get immediately on the phone and start to straighten this out. So we have very strong support from our congressional partners there. And that, I think, happened swiftly simply because of the fact that we were there at that opportune time.
Thank you for that update and for being on top of it. Councilmember Carlskin. Councilmember Lordson.
It was an interesting couple of days, and it was great to be have access to our elected officials. I mean, our Washington elected officials, and there was some good information that was expanded. As far as the Placer County business, one of the major things that that I'm very impressed with, is our concentration on our water supply, and not so much from the Placer County Business Association, but also cap to cap. We're it's water's important, and it's important for development. So it was good. It was good to hear some of the other.
To clarify that for you, you're reporting out that you were able to attend DC last week, but also are participating in the virtual cap to cap this week, and we're part of the water policy group.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be specific.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
For me, I know it's already been talked about, but I did want to report out, like Paul said, I think it's important whenever we're using taxpayer dollars that there be an actual direct benefit to it. And as I had communicated with some of my council members in advance, I was a little nervous, a little tentative. It's the first first go at it, the first trip. And I was hoping that it actually proved to be worth the investment. I think that it was important that we went just from the get-go because it's one of the first times that everyone has been back together. And as everyone is aware, Lincoln often is fighting over legal issues with the county and others. And I think sometimes when you aren't at the table, you sometimes end up on the table. So I think that it was important for us to show up. But I got a lot more out of it than that. And I think maybe I wanted to highlight, because maybe unique to my perspective in life because of what I do at my day job, is there was one breakout session in particular where we were talking about water and forest management, and the individuals that they had brought in the room to hear from our group, and our group was all of the business leaders and most of the electeds, or at least a representative from each board or council, just about, from the region. And so they were able to hear our concerns, and we were able to hear what they're doing. And it was at the senior staff level. And I heard that there were some people in the room who were disappointed because it wasn't supposed to be just senior staff. It was supposed to be their boss, but there was an important vote and there were some other things. But we were really lucky that we got that, because those are the decision makers. Those are the people who are negotiating these bills for their bosses. Those are the people who are chewing through the meat of it. If there's a permit that's stuck, if there's a problem, those are the staff that are directing what happens with it. They're not ultimately the decision makers, but make no mistake, they are who informs the decision maker. And the decision maker have so many decisions to make that they lean very, 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 very heavily on their senior staff. And, at work, I see that sometimes you educate first and you're able to bring, your issues and why it's a problem for you and what you need. And it's not an overnight thing. It's not like anyone from the public can say, oh, they went and then the next day this got changed and this is unstuck. Although I do think some of that is happening per Paul's report. But it is one of those things where right now the federal infrastructure bill is being negotiated. There are all kinds of considerations in that bill about, are those funds going to flow down to the CBDG? Which is a grant that could be available to cities our size. What does that look like? What does local investment look like? And to hear our needs and what we would like, the fruits of that discussion could really influence some of those conversations on the back end. And so I thought to myself while we were in the middle of that session, if this was all we came here for, it was worth every single penny, because it makes a bigger and more impactful statement to have that many people who are decision makers for a county in a room with consensus, saying the same thing, asking the same questions. It's not just one voice informing those senior staff. And it was from the Bureau of Reclamation. It was the Natural Resources and Water Committee. It was some prominent congressional offices. Feinstein's office was there. Padilla's office was there. LaMalfa himself was there. Congressman McClintock's chief of staff was there. There were people in the room.
Intended to be there, but was called away.
There was a vote. The vote on the infrastructure package actually was happening. And so it was, to me, a very impactful and the right people in the room for issues that really are relevant to our county. So I wanted to report on that and just say that I actually thought that it was very impactful for all of us to be there. Did you have anything? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.